Sarah Martinez had always been competitive, but today she felt especially frustrated. The indoor shooting range buzzed with the usual crowd of weekend warriors and serious marksmen, but her shots kept drifting left, no matter how she adjusted her stance. She'd been coming here for 3 months now, ever since her divorce was finalized, looking for something that would help her feel strong and independent again. The paper target at 25 yards seemed to mock her with its scattered bullet holes, none of them hitting the center rings she desperately wanted to reach. Her ex-husband had always criticized her for being too emotional and not focused enough, and right now, those words echoed in her head as she fumbled with another magazine reload. "Focus. Sarah," she whispered to herself, adjusting her protective eyewear and ear protection. The range safety officer had been watching her struggle for the past hour, occasionally offering tips about breathing and trigger control, but nothing seemed to click. She was using her own pistol, a compact 9mm she'd purchased after taking a basic firearms safety course, but the results were consistently disappointing. 2 lanes over, a tall man in his 30s worked with mechanical precision. His shots formed tight groups that would make any instructor proud, and he moved with the kind of fluid confidence that spoke of years of training. Sarah tried not to stare, but she couldn't help noticing how different his approach was from her own. Where she tensed up and rushed her shots, he remained calm and methodical. The man had arrived about 30 minutes after Sarah, carrying a large case that suggested he was serious about his shooting. His clothing was simple but functional, dark jeans and a plain gray shirt. But there was something about his posture and the way he handled his weapon that set him apart from the typical range visitors. Sarah attempted another string of shots, trying to implement the breathing techniques she'd read about online. Breathe in, exhale halfway, hold, squeeze the trigger slowly. But her frustration was building with each shot that missed the mark. She'd taken this up as a way to build confidence and learn self-reliance, but instead, she felt more inadequate than ever. The shooting range had become her sanctuary over the past few months. After her marriage ended, she'd realized how dependent she'd become on her ex-husband for everything from changing light bulbs to handling their finances. Learning to shoot was supposed to be part of her journey toward independence, a skill that would make her feel capable and strong. But today was testing her resolve. The other shooters around her seemed so confident and skilled, while she struggled with basics that should have become second nature by now. Her instructor from the safety course had warned her that progress would come slowly, but she'd hoped to see more improvement after 3 months of regular practice. The man 2 lanes over finished his string of shots and began packing up his equipment. Sarah watched from the corner of her eye as he methodically cleaned his rifle and secured it in its case. There was something almost meditative about his movements, a stark contrast to her own hurried and anxious approach to shooting. As she prepared for another attempt, Sarah tried to channel some of that calm confidence she'd observed. Maybe if she could just slow down and approach this more systematically, her results would improve. The afternoon was young, and she'd already paid for 2 hours of range time. There was still opportunity to salvage this session and maybe even achieve the breakthrough she'd been hoping for. She loaded a fresh magazine, took her stance, and tried once more to find the zone that skilled shooters talked about, where everything else faded away except the sight picture and the trigger press. This time she told herself things would be different. Sarah's next 5 shots weren't much better than her previous attempts. 3 hit the outer rings of the target while 2 missed the scoring area entirely. She set down her pistol with a heavy sigh and pulled off her ear protection, feeling the familiar sting of disappointment. Around her, the sharp cracks of gunfire continued as other shooters worked through their practice sessions with varying degrees of success. She was contemplating calling it a day when she noticed the man from 2 lanes over hadn't left as she'd assumed. Instead, he was setting up a different rifle, this one with a scope that looked more sophisticated than anything else on the firing line. He moved with the same methodical precision she'd observed earlier, adjusting the scope and checking his equipment with practiced efficiency. "Excuse me," came a voice beside her. Sarah turned to find the man standing at the edge of her shooting lane, holding what appeared to be a small notebook. Up close, she could see he was probably in his early 30s, with short brown hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in details quickly. His expression was friendly but serious. "I couldn't help but notice you're working pretty hard over here," he said, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. "Mind if I ask how long you've been shooting?" There was nothing condescending in his tone, just genuine curiosity, which surprised Sarah. Most of the men at the range either ignored her completely or offered unsolicited advice that felt more like showing off than helping. "About 3 months," Sarah admitted, feeling somewhat embarrassed. "I thought I'd be better by now. Everything I read online makes it sound like it should click after a few weeks of practice. But I feel like I'm getting worse instead of better." The man nodded thoughtfully, glancing at her target and then back at her setup. "What's your background with firearms? Military, hunting, family tradition?" When Sarah shook her head to all three, his expression became more understanding. Starting from scratch as an adult is actually harder than most people realize. There's a lot of muscle memory and mental habits to develop. "Are you a professional instructor?" Sarah asked, noting how he seemed to analyze her shooting position and equipment with trained eyes. "You shoot like someone who does this for a living." "Something like that," he replied with a slight smile. "I'm Michael, by the way. And you're right that 3 months should be enough time to see significant improvement, but only if you're practicing the right things. A lot of shooters develop bad habits early on that actually make them worse over time." Sarah introduced herself and found herself opening up about her frustration. Michael listened without interrupting, occasionally asking specific questions about her training and practice routine. Unlike the range safety officer who offered generic advice, Michael seemed to understand the specific challenges she was facing. "The thing is," Michael explained, "shooting isn't just about physical technique. There's a huge mental component that most basic courses don't really address. When you're frustrated or trying too hard, your body does things that work against accuracy. Tension in your shoulders, irregular breathing, rushing the trigger press because you want to see results." As he spoke, Sarah realized he was describing exactly what she'd been experiencing. The more she wanted to improve, the more tense and hurried she became, creating a cycle that prevented the very progress she was seeking. "I was actually about to work with a precision rifle," Michael continued, gesturing toward his equipment. "If you're interested, I could show you some fundamentals that apply to any type of shooting. Sometimes starting with a more stable platform helps people understand the principles better." Sarah felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the offer. She'd been struggling alone for months, and here was someone who clearly knew what he was doing, offering to help. But she also felt self-conscious about her lack of skill, and worried about looking foolish in front of someone so obviously experienced. The afternoon crowd at the range was thinning out, leaving more space and making conversation easier. Sarah looked at her scattered target one more time, then at Michael's rifle setup, which looked both intimidating and intriguing. Maybe this was exactly the kind of help she needed to break through her plateau. "I'd like that," Sarah said, surprising herself with how quickly she accepted Michael's offer. "But I should warn you, I might be a hopeless case. My ex-husband always said I couldn't focus on anything for more than 5 minutes. Michael's expression grew slightly more serious. "Well, your ex-husband was wrong about that. I've been watching you for the past hour, and focus isn't your problem. You're actually trying too hard, which is the opposite issue." He gestured for her to follow him to his shooting station. "The first thing we need to do is get you to relax." As they walked the few steps to his lane, Sarah noticed other shooters glancing over with interest. It wasn't common to see someone sharing equipment at the range, especially with a rifle that looked as expensive and sophisticated as Michael's. The weapon was mounted on a bipod and equipped with a high-end scope that probably cost more than Sarah's car payment. "This is a precision bolt-action rifle," Michael explained, running his hand along the stock. "It's designed for accuracy at long distances, but the principles we'll work on apply to any firearm. The main difference is that this setup is more forgiving of small mistakes, so you can focus on the fundamentals without fighting the equipment." Sarah examined the rifle more closely. It was heavier than her pistol and felt more substantial, almost reassuring in its solid construction. The scope looked complicated, with various adjustments and markings she didn't understand, but Michael seemed to read her apprehension. "Don't worry about the technical aspects right now," he said. "I've already zeroed the scope for this distance, so all you need to do is learn the basics of sight picture and trigger control. Think of this as a very precise tool that will show you exactly what you're doing right or wrong." Before letting her handle the rifle, Michael spent several minutes explaining safety procedures specific to this weapon. Sarah appreciated his thoroughness, even though she already knew basic range safety rules. There was something about his teaching style that made her feel capable rather than stupid. a refreshing change from most of her learning experiences. Now, the position is crucial with precision shooting, Michael continued, adjusting the bipod legs and showing Sarah how to settle in behind the rifle. Your body needs to be a stable platform, but relaxed. Think of yourself as a human shooting rest, not a tense bundle of muscles trying to force the shot. As Sarah settled into the shooting position, she immediately noticed how different this felt from shooting her pistol. The rifle's weight and the bipod support made everything feel more stable and controlled. Michael positioned himself beside her, offering gentle corrections to her posture and grip. The biggest mistake new shooters make is thinking they need to muscle the rifle into submission, he explained. Really, you want to work with the weapon, not against it. Let the stock settle into your shoulder naturally, and find a cheek weld that brings your eye to the scope without straining. Sarah followed his instructions, surprised by how much more comfortable this position felt compared to her usual pistol stance. Through the scope, the target appeared much larger and more detailed than she was used to seeing. She could actually make out the individual scoring rings clearly, something that had always been a challenge with iron sights. Good, Michael said, observing her position. Now breathing is critical for precision work. You want to take a breath, let out about half, and then hold it while you take the shot. But don't hold it so long that you start to shake or feel uncomfortable. The concept wasn't new to Sarah, but having someone guide her through it step by step made it feel more manageable. With the rifle's stability and Michael's calm instruction, she felt more confident than she had in months of solo practice. For the first time, shooting felt like something she might actually be able to master. The trigger is where most people struggle, Michael continued, his voice steady and encouraging. With your pistol, you're probably used to a fairly heavy trigger pull, but this rifle has what we call a crisp light break. You want to press straight back slowly and smoothly until the shot surprises you. Sarah positioned her finger on the trigger, immediately noticing how different it felt from her pistol. The trigger seemed to have less travel and required much less pressure. Through the scope, she could see the crosshairs centered on the bullseye, and for the first time in months, she felt like she might actually hit what she was aiming at. Take your time, Michael said quietly. There's no rush. When you're ready, start applying pressure slowly and steadily. Don't try to time the shot or anticipate when it will fire. Just keep increasing pressure until it happens naturally. Sarah took a breath, exhaled halfway, and began the trigger press. The crosshairs stayed remarkably steady thanks to the rifle's stability, and she found herself entering a state of focus she'd never experienced before. The background noise of the range seemed to fade away, and her entire world narrowed to the sight picture and the gradual pressure on the trigger. The shot broke cleanly, surprising her as Michael had predicted. Through the scope, she could see a neat hole in the target's bullseye, closer to the center than any shot she'd fired in 3 months of practice. The feeling was electrifying, a rush of accomplishment and validation that made her want to jump up and celebrate. Outstanding, Michael said with genuine enthusiasm. That's exactly what proper fundamentals look like. Did you feel how different that was from your usual shooting experience? Sarah nodded eagerly, still staring at the target through the scope. It felt so much more controlled, like the rifle was doing what I wanted instead of fighting me. Is it really that much easier with a precision rifle? Or was that just beginner's luck? It's both, Michael replied with a smile. The rifle is more forgiving and stable, which helps, but what you just demonstrated is that you have the capability for precision shooting. You just needed the right platform and instruction to bring it out. As Sarah prepared for a second shot, she felt a confidence she hadn't experienced since starting her shooting journey. The position felt natural now, and she was beginning to understand what Michael meant about working with the weapon rather than against it. The mental aspects he'd mentioned were starting to make sense too, as she found herself calm and focused rather than tense and frustrated. Her second shot landed just slightly outside the bullseye, still an excellent result by her standards. The third was back in the center ring, and by the fourth shot, Sarah was beginning to develop a feel for the rifle's characteristics and her own shooting rhythm. I can't believe how much better this feels, she said between shots. I was starting to think I just wasn't cut out for shooting sports. Michael watched her technique carefully, offering occasional minor adjustments, but mostly letting her develop her own understanding of the process. The thing about shooting is that it's very much a mental game disguised as a physical skill. Once your mind is in the right place, your body usually follows pretty quickly. As the afternoon continued, Other shooters occasionally glanced over at their lane, clearly impressed by the tight group Sarah was producing. She could hardly believe the transformation herself. Just an hour earlier, she'd been ready to give up on shooting entirely, and now she was experiencing the kind of precision she'd only dreamed about. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant about fundamentals," Sarah said, settling in for another shot. "It's not about forcing perfect results, it's about creating the right conditions for good shots to happen naturally." Michael nodded approvingly. "Exactly. And now that you understand these principles, you'll be able to apply them to your pistol shooting too. The platform is different, but the mental approach and fundamentals remain the same." After an hour of shooting with Michael's rifle, Sarah had fired more accurate shots than in all her previous range sessions combined. As she prepared to return to her own pistol, she felt both grateful and curious about her unexpected instructor. There had been subtle hints throughout their time together that suggested Michael's expertise went far beyond casual hobby shooting. "Before I let you get back to your own practice," Sarah said, "can I ask what you do professionally? You obviously have serious training, and this equipment isn't exactly what most weekend shooters bring to the range." Michael paused in his rifle maintenance, considering his answer carefully. "I'm in the military," he said simply. "Special operations, specifically. I've been deployed overseas multiple times, which is where I developed most of my shooting skills." The revelation explained so much about Michael's approach to instruction and his obvious competence with firearms. Sarah had suspected he might be law enforcement or military, but hearing that he was special operations put his expertise in an entirely different category. She felt both honored that he'd taken time to help her and slightly intimidated by the level of skill he represented. "Navy SEALs?" she asked, remembering something about his mention of deployments and precision shooting requirements. "That's right," Michael confirmed. "I've been with the teams for about 8 years now. Precision shooting is a big part of what we do, so I've had extensive training in marksmanship instruction as well as practical application." Sarah processed this information with a mix of awe and gratitude. A Navy SEAL had just spent his afternoon teaching her to shoot, patiently working with a struggling beginner when he could have been working on his own advanced training. The generosity of the gesture wasn't lost on her. "Why did you decide to help me?" she asked. "I mean, you could have just focused on your own practice session." Michael finished cleaning his rifle before answering. "Honestly, I could see you were getting frustrated, and I've been there myself. Everyone starts somewhere, and good instruction early on can make the difference between someone who gives up and someone who becomes genuinely skilled. Plus, teaching helps me stay sharp on the fundamentals too." As they talked, Sarah learned more about Michael's background and current situation. He was between deployments, stationed at a nearby naval base, and used the civilian shooting range to maintain his skills and work with different equipment. His precision rifle was actually his personal weapon, something he'd built to his own specifications for long-range shooting competitions. "Do you compete professionally?" Sarah asked, impressed by the level of customization in his equipment. "Some," Michael replied. "Mostly precision rifle competitions on the civilian side. It's good practice, and the competitive aspect keeps me sharp. Plus, it's enjoyable to shoot without someone shooting back at you." The casual way he mentioned people shooting back reminded Sarah of the serious nature of Michael's work. While she'd been struggling with paper targets as a hobby, he'd been using similar skills in life-or-death situations overseas. The perspective was both humbling and inspiring. "I really can't thank you enough for this," Sarah said as they prepared to move back to her shooting lane. "I was about ready to give up on this entirely, and now I feel like I actually have a chance to become decent at it." Michael helped her gather her equipment and walked with her back to her original position. "The key now is to apply what you learned with the rifle to your pistol shooting. The fundamentals are the same, even though the platform is different. Focus on the mental aspects we talked about and be patient with the process." Before returning to his own practice, Michael wrote down his contact information on a piece of paper. "If you're serious about improving, I come here most Saturday afternoons. You're welcome to join me for practice sessions if you'd like continued instruction. I enjoy teaching and you're a good student." Sarah accepted the offer gratefully, already looking forward to their next session. As Michael returned to his own lane and began setting up for another round of precision shooting, she reflected on how dramatically her day had changed. What started as a frustrating failure had become a breakthrough moment that restored her confidence and opened up new possibilities for her shooting journey. 6 months later, Sarah stood confidently at the firing line of a regional precision shooting competition, her own custom rifle steady on its bipod. The transformation from frustrated beginner to competitive shooter seemed almost impossible to believe. But the scores on her target told the story of dedicated practice and excellent instruction. Michael stood behind her as her spotter, calling wind conditions and helping her read the environmental factors that affected long-range shots. Their Saturday afternoon training sessions had evolved into a serious competitive partnership, with Sarah's natural aptitude for precision work becoming apparent once she learned proper fundamentals. "Wind's picking up from the left," Michael said quietly into his spotting scope. "About 5 miles per hour, steady. Adjust 2 clicks right and hold center." Sarah made the scope adjustment smoothly, having learned to trust Michael's wind calls completely. In the months since their first meeting, she discovered that her struggles with pistol shooting had been masking a real talent for precision rifle work. Her patient personality and attention to detail, qualities her ex-husband had criticized, turned out to be perfect assets for competitive shooting. The relationship that had developed between them extended beyond just shooting instruction. Michael had become a close friend and eventually something more, though both had been careful to let their connection develop naturally. Sarah's journey toward independence had led her to someone who appreciated her determination and supported her goals rather than undermining them. "Time," called the range officer, signaling the end of the shooting period. Sarah engaged her rifle's safety and began the process of making the weapon safe for scoring. Around them, other competitors completed the same ritual, the culmination of months of training and preparation. As they walked downrange to score targets, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that frustrating afternoon when she'd considered giving up on shooting entirely. Learning marksmanship had given her confidence that extended far beyond the shooting range, and meeting Michael had shown her what a supportive partnership could look like. "You shot really well today," Michael said as they examined her target. The group of shots was tight and well-centered, exactly the kind of precision that won competitions. "I think you've got a real chance at placing in the top 3. The scores were announced an hour later, and Sarah found herself on the podium in second place, holding a trophy that represented not just shooting skill but personal transformation. The woman who had struggled with basic pistol accuracy just months earlier was now a recognized competitor in precision rifle shooting. During the award ceremony, Sarah caught sight of a young woman at the back of the crowd who looked frustrated and discouraged, much like Sarah herself had looked that day at the shooting range. After the ceremony concluded, she made her way over to introduce herself and offer encouragement. "First competition?" Sarah asked gently, recognizing the signs of a shooter who was struggling with confidence. The young woman nodded, looking embarrassed. "I've been practicing for 6 months, but I shot terribly today. I'm starting to think I'm just not cut out for this sport." Sarah smiled, remembering her own similar feelings. "I felt exactly the same way not too long ago. The key is finding the right instruction and being patient with yourself. Would you be interested in joining our practice sessions? My partner and I train most Saturday afternoons, and we're always happy to work with new shooters." As Sarah exchanged contact information with the struggling competitor, she felt the satisfaction of completing a full circle. The help and encouragement she'd received from Michael was now something she could pass forward to others, creating a chain of support and improvement that embodied the best aspects of the shooting community. Looking back at Michael, who was packing their equipment with the same methodical precision she'd first admired, Sarah realized that sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as ordinary Saturday afternoons. That day at the shooting range when a Navy SEAL had stepped aside and handed her his rifle had changed everything, launching her on a journey of skill development, personal growth, and unexpected love that continued to unfold with each new challenge she embraced.